Thank you, friends. I'm Dr. A.S.K. Gupta, and today we are going to talk to you about the new drugs in the diabetes management. And you must be seeing that good number of drugs have come in the diabetes management, and one of them is the SGLT2 inhibitors. What are these SGLT2 inhibitors? You must be hearing the names as empagliflozin, remigliflozin, or dapagliflozin, and so many other drugs. And after a very long time, we have come across a few drugs which are able to decrease the blood sugar levels in a very significant manner. Previously, we used to have the Downhill, we used to have the glimepiride, we used to have gliclazide. They were the drugs which were able to decrease the blood sugar levels in a very significant manner. And we then kept on adding the new drugs like DPP4 inhibitors, which were able to be decreasing the blood sugar level, but they were not very effective drugs. For last 5-7 years, we have had another armamentarium in the diabetes portfolio, which could decrease the blood sugar levels in a very, very significant manner. And that too without many side effects. And these drugs are basically the SGLT2 inhibitors. Today we are going to talk about the SGLT2 inhibitors, what are their side effects, and how can we use them in the clinical practice. We as the specialists are used to using these SGLT2 inhibitors, but the basic clinical practitioner, the family physician, is yet not aware about these drugs, and they are quite scared to use these drugs. And we are trying to make these drugs popular because they are very effective drugs. They not only decrease the blood sugar levels, but they also decrease the incidence of complications. They are able to decrease the heart-related complications, the stroke-related complication, and the renal complications. And they are really very effective drugs in patients with diabetes. And how can we use these drugs optimally so that the risk of these complications in patients with diabetes is decreased in a big manner? And this is myself, Dr. A.S.K. Gupta, and I'm a senior consultant physician, and I've been practicing medicine for the last 35 years. I'm a graduate and a postgraduate from Maulana Medical College. I was recently awarded the FICP by the Association of Physicians of India. I have my interest in the diabetes, COVID and hypertension, lipid management, and my COVID updates early morning are very popular these days. It has become really like a morning newspaper. Everybody waits for the COVID update from Dr. S.K. Gupta. But we have the equal interest in diabetes and the management of hypertension. We also have a robust social media business by the way of YouTube and the Facebook, and we have nearly 40,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel and millions of views by the national and international subscribers. Thank you very much. This is my brief introduction. And now I'll be going on to the presentation of the today's time, that is the new avenues in the management of. Can you all see me? Can you all see my slides? I can't change the slide. Can you somebody help me?
Sir, you can change by arrow key.
How can I change it myself?
Sir, you can change by arrow key, left, right.
Okay, fine. Thank you. My slide is visible in full screen?
Yes, sir.
Fine, thank you.
Yes, sir. It is visible, sir.
Fine, thank you very much. Now we will be talking about the new avenues in the management of diabetes and the cardiovascular and CKD link. Before we go on to the management of these issues with the new drugs, we should really understand why do we need these new drugs, and why does a patient with diabetes need the correction of diabetes, and why does he need to control his blood sugar? Because a blood sugar level of say 200, 300 does not kill a patient immediately. These are the cardiovascular complications or the renal complication that kills a patient over the period of time if the diabetes remains uncontrolled for a very long period of time. And what is the burden of disease? The cardiovascular disease is the major cause of premature death in patients with diabetes. 70 to 75% of deaths may be attributable to the cardiovascular complications. Stroke, if the diabetes remains uncontrolled over a long period of time, then the stroke risk increases 2 to 4 times, and the coronary heart risk, they increase the coronary heart disease deaths, they increase by 2 to 4 fold. In both these things, you find that the figure is 2 to 4 times. Why is it 2 to 4 times in both the things? Because it is basically the vessels which are involved in the diabetes, and the vessels, when they are involved in the heart, they give rise to the coronary heart disease and the death, and when they are involved in the brain, they give rise to the stroke. And this is the not only the deaths, but the morbidity can also increase, and the risk of heart failure increases by nearly 2 to 5 times if the diabetes remains uncontrolled. Now, the Indian phenotype is a particular problem because we Indians have other associated comorbidities, and they add to the burden of complications in diabetes. And most of the diabetic patients in our Indian scenario, they have the associated obesity, which is also called the diabesity or the dyslipidemia, the diabetic dyslipidemia, and the hypertension. About the 57% of the Indian diabetics, they have associated abdominal obesity, and about 71% they have the associated hypertension. And these two comorbidities, when they are added to the diabetes, they lead to the cardiovascular complications, and they increase them by 2 times. And they also have the worsening of the renal outcome, and about 40 to 70% they have the risk of renal complications. And if we go by these complications, we find that the diabetes is a very strong risk factor, not only for the cardiovascular disease, but also for the development of chronic renal disease. And you might have heard in your neighborhood also that this patient of diabetes developed the heart attack, and he developed the renal failure, or he's having a kidney disease. 40% of the patients with diabetes, upon screening for the microalbuminuria or the EGFR, they are found to have the evidence of chronic kidney disease. And the risk of death is nearly 10 times higher than the risk of progression to the end-stage renal disease. Why is it that the patients of diabetes do not progress to the end-stage renal disease? Why is it that diabetes is a protective factor? No, it is really not so. Because the cardiovascular disease, it takes over and kills the patient earlier than the kidney disease is able to progress to the end-stage renal disease. And most of these patients, they are likely to die of cardiovascular disease rather than progressing to the end-stage renal disease. What if we keep the diabetes in without control, and what happens if we bring the HbA1c level by 1%? UKPDS data, whenever we talk of diabetes, we cannot forget a UKPDS study, and because it was a very significant study over a very, very long period of time, including large number of patients. And this study showed us that 1% decrease in the HbA1c was associated with significant reduction in any diabetes-related endpoints, including diabetes-related deaths, all-cause mortality, and myocardial infarction. And when we let the HbA1c rise by 1%, we find that there is increase in the heart failure by 20%. There is increase in the risk of 12% of death, and there is 7% increase in the risk of major cardiovascular event. So controlling the diabetes is extremely important. But what is the time frame when should we start controlling the diabetes? It was found that those patients who have an initial control of diabetes, within the very first year of diabetes onset, they have a better cardiovascular outcome. Those patients who have the inertia to go to the doctor, control their diabetes in initial first year, then they have the dysglycemic effect, and they have the dysglycemic legacy over a long period of time. Why is it that the first year, in case the diabetes is controlled better, then the glycemic legacy or the benefit persists for a very long time? It is because that the initial 1 year, the vascular changes occur. And when these vascular changes, they can be prevented, their effect lasts longer, and the risk of cardiovascular disease and the renal disease, this can be prevented over a long period of time. So controlling the diabetes in the initial first year has a long-term benefit. Those patients who feel that they can go for the treatment of diabetes and control the diabetes. Later on, when it increases too much, they are likely to be not benefited, and it is always advisable that the patient should go to the doctor as early as possible, and the doctor should be very aggressive to treat the diabetes since very beginning, because at 5.3 years, that is about 5 years later, they have a significant increase in the risk of myocardial infarction by 67%, stroke by 51%, heart failure by 64%. Now we are talking about the SGLT2 inhibitors. What is their mechanism of action? I in the beginning told you that the SGLT2 inhibitors, they are the very important drugs in our armamentarium for last 5-6 years. How do they work? They work through the kidney. We were initially talking about the muscles, we were talking about the liver for the action of various drugs. Now we have the drugs which basically act on the kidney. This is the kidney and this is the glomerulus, and you all know that the glomerulus leads to the filtration of glucose, and once the glucose is filtered by the glomerulus, the glucose is reabsorbed to save the energy. But these drugs, these SGLT2 inhibitors, they what do they do? They basically block this SGLT2 co-transporter pump, and they lead to the excretion of glucose through the urine. And good amount of glucose, nearly 80 grams of glucose, is excreted by a person in the effect of SGLT2 inhibitors. And this 80 grams of glucose, 1 gram of glucose provides you nearly 5 kilocalories of energy. So about 80 grams of glucose, if it is excreted in one day by these agents, it leads to the significant decrease in the energy. So these drugs, they lead to the decrease in the weight. And secondly, these drugs, they will have associated osmotic diuresis, because glucose along with it will take the sodium, will also take the water along with it. So the expanded intravascular volume or the interstitial fluid will decrease and will therefore have a decreased effect on the blood pressure control, and they will have the cardiovascular benefits. So these drugs, they will have the glycemic effect, they will have the glycosuria, they will have reduce the HbA1c level, they will decrease the glucotoxicity because they will significantly bring down the blood sugar level, and they will improve the beta cell function, and they will reduce the body weight. And natriuresis along with the osmotic diuresis will decrease the plasma interstitial volume, they will decrease the blood pressure, they will decrease the glomerular hyperfiltration. So these drugs, they will have a profound effect on the metabolic, cardiovascular, and renal improvement. Now, what are the characteristics of a drug when a doctor wants to use? And in case all these characteristics are present, then the doctor is very happy using the drug. The drug should have a glucose or the HbA1c lowering efficacy. Yes, these drugs, they have a moderately good efficacy. They should have a very low risk of hypoglycemia. Yes, these drugs, and they should decrease the body weight in obese people. Yes, these drugs, they also decrease the body weight. They improve the postprandial glycemic excursion. They improve the peripheral hyperinsulinemia, that is, they increase the insulin resistance, they decrease the insulin resistance, and they should be tolerable. They are very well tolerated drug, and they have very few adverse events if they are used properly. They improve the beta cell function, they prevent the microvascular complication, they prevent the macrovascular complication also, that is, they prevent the CVD, and they are low cost. They are not truly low cost, but with the advent of time, with the passage of time, the cost of these drugs is decreasing, and they are becoming more and more affordable. And with last 5 to 6 years of usage, we find that the drugs are having a long-term safety, and they add quality years to the life in patients with diabetes. So these drugs, they have nearly all the parameters to satisfy their usage. What are the cardiorenal benefits of SGLT2 inhibitors? They decrease the cardiac preload, that is, they decrease the venous load as well as the arterial load, that is, the preload as well as afterload has decreased, and thereby they decrease the cardiac wall stress, they increase the efficiency, that is, the cardiac output. In the kidney, they decrease the glucose sodium reabsorption, they decrease the intraclavicular pressure, they decrease the renin-angiotensin system activity, they decrease the hyperfiltration, they decrease the inflammation, hypoxia, and they lead to the decrease in the plasma volume, arterial stiffness, decrease in systolic blood pressure, improve the hematocrit, and thereby they decrease the cardiovascular outcomes, and they decrease the heart failure hospitalization and stabilization of EGFR, and the decrease in the albuminuria. So they have two major effects. One is the effects, good effects on the heart, and secondly, good effects on the kidney. And there are two major complications which lead to the death of large number of patients. EMPA-REG trial, one of the major trials in favor of empagliflozin, which beyond doubt showed that the empagliflozin decreases the 3-point major adverse cardiac events in patients with diabetes, and decrease the cardiovascular death by 38%, decrease the all-cause mortality, heart failure hospitalizations, and decrease the incidence of worsening of nephropathy. All the things were decreased, like the deaths, we could decrease the morbidity, we could decrease the mortality, we could decrease the progression of kidney disease. Once we start these drugs, how early these cardiovascular benefits of empagliflozin start becoming apparent? The cardiovascular benefits will not start becoming apparent from the day one of usage. When the drug is used for a long period of time, then these effects will come into the picture. The benefits of the cardiovascular death, when the post hoc analysis was done for this trial, EMPA-REG trial, we found that the cardiovascular deaths decrease reached a significant level for the first time at 60 days, nearly 58 days after the usage. And the early effects, they appear to be on the hospitalization for the heart failure. Why is it that the hospitalization for the heart failure improves faster than the cardiovascular death? Because hospitalization for the heart disease is dependent upon the cardiovascular and dependent on the interstitial volume and intravascular volume. And these drugs, they not only decrease the intravascular volume but also decrease the interstitial fluid by virtue of osmotic natriuresis and diuresis, control the HbA1c. And these drugs therefore decrease the hospitalization for the heart failure much faster than the cardiovascular outcomes. And we found that the heart failure hospitalization was able to decrease at day 17, while the beginning of the cardiovascular death decreased because the hospitalization of the heart failure started decreasing at 27 days. Other cardiovascular effects like myocardial infarction starts, and they started showing a benefit much later, that is around 60 days, that is 2 months of use. This is one slide which shows that the drug is comparatively much better than the counterparts, that is liraglutide, which required 98 points, and the ramipril, which required 56 points to prevent one death. This is a complex calculation. I will not go into the details, but the slide basically shows that the drug is comparatively good drug in comparison to the ACE inhibitors and the GLP-1 analogs. What are the short-term changes? We told that the drug is effective in the long term, that once this drug is given for 60 days, it is able to decrease the cardiovascular mortality. What happens in the initial part? Initially, when we start giving the drug, there is reduction in the albuminuria, which is a positive indicator of the long-term cardiovascular and renal benefits. Empagliflozin reduced the urine albumin-creatinine ratio by 18% at 12 weeks, and this increased the likelihood of 30% reduction in the urine albumin-creatinine ratio. Each 30% decrease in the urine albumin-creatinine ratio in the first 12 weeks was statistically significant and was associated with a lower hazard ratio for 3 point in the major cardiovascular events. Renal protection by the SGLT2 inhibitor empagliflozin, it decreases the worsening of nephropathy by 32%. It decreases the progression of microalbuminuria by 31%. Some patients, they ask me, doctor, how can we decrease the creatinine? This is the drug which can prevent the doubling of the serum creatinine in about 42%. And it can it can basically delay the renal replacement therapy in nearly 50% of the patients. How does it do so? By decreasing, by having the glycosuria, by improving the natriuresis and diuresis, by having the uricosuriya and improving the intraglomerular pressure. It basically protects the kidney in all three ways. And the drug might have a synergistic effect with the other BP lowering agents like diuretics in diabetes, type 2 diabetes and CKD. So drug will not have any adverse interaction when the other drugs are used along with. These are the various trials which have been done with the various SGLT2 inhibitors, and these effects, they appear to be class effects. And the basically Vertis trial, Declare trial, which was done with dapagliflozin, DAPA heart failure trial, and the canagliflozin trial, and the empagliflozin, EMPEROR trial, basically EMPA-REG and the EMPEROR trials, with the two trials with the with the empagliflozin and the DAPA-HF and the Declare trial, but the two important trials with the dapagliflozin by the Canvas trial with the canagliflozin. And all these trials, beyond doubt, showed that these drugs, they have a wonderful effect in the kidney as well as the heart. Empagliflozin showed consistent and robust reduction in all cardiovascular and renal outcomes. Let us talk a little bit more about the EMPEROR reduced trial. Empagliflozin is very effective drug in heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, with or without diabetes. This was a trial which changed the scenario of the management of heart failure, and we were confident of using the drug alone in patients with heart failure even without diabetes, because it decreased the composite cardiovascular death or heart failure hospitalization by 25%. It decreased the total first and recurrent heart failure hospitalization by 30%. A drug which decreased the death by 25%. And not only that, the first heart failure hospitalization, the drug had a sustained effect and was able to decrease the secondary endpoints by 50% in renal events over the period of time. So the drug was effective not only initially but had a sustained activity over a long period of time. This is the data of the trial, which showed that a good number of patients, nearly 4,000 patients, were used for a long period, around 15 months to 18 months and 1.5 years. And about half of these patients had diabetes and half did not have diabetes. And even in non-diabetics, the drug was able to decrease the heart failure outcomes and the kidney outcomes. So what are the implications of this drug in the clinical practice? SGLT2 inhibitors will have a major impact on the role of management of patients with cardiac heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, with or without diabetes. Why is it so that the drugs, they have a major impact? Because they do not require titration. Like other drugs, they do not have the effects on the potassium, and they do not require titration. And the patient, they can be given these drugs and they can continue to use the drugs without much monitoring. They offer the modest weight loss, they lead to the modest blood pressure reduction, that too without major effects on the hyperkalemia or near simultaneous initiation and other heart failure medications. And they can be used in high-risk population, that including the older adults also. Patients with a very low renal function, patients with low renal function, that is those patients who have a heart ejection, those patients who have a EGFR of more than 20 ml per minute, in whom we are really worried to use the ACE inhibitors and the ARBs and the newer drugs like nepotisone inhibitors. We can use combinately these drugs, and these drugs, they appear to be safe and provide long-term kidney protection and the heart failure protection. What is the rationale of using this combination of SGLT2 inhibitors along with the DPP-4? What happens if we combine the DPP-4 inhibitors? Are we able to have a sustained long-term effect and additive effect in decreasing the HbA1c level? You all know that the diabetes has a complex pathophysiology, and not one drug is able to control all the pathophysiological parameters. And very important thing is that these drugs, they lead to the increase in glucagon, and this glucagon rise is offset in case we use DPP-4 inhibitors along with these drugs. And these two drugs, when they are combined together, they can have the pleiotropic benefits and they can have a better tolerability profile if they are used in combination. There is a chat box question in which I see that can these drugs be used in the early diabetes? The diabetes standard of care in diabetes in 2020, there was a concept that we have to initially add the metformin in the beginning, and then overall that we have to sequentially add number of drugs. But the trials with the SGLT2 inhibitors showed us that they have these drugs, the combination, if they are given initially in those patients, those who needed higher HbA1c reduction, then even before the use of metformin, these drugs, they can be initially used in these patients, and they are effective in bringing down the HbA1c level to the tune of 1.5 to 2%. So these drugs, they can be a wonderful usage drug. I mean, they are used in combination. They decrease the both these are like I'm trying to compare the parameters. SGLT2 inhibitors, they decrease the body weight. DPP-4 inhibitors are weight neutral. Especially, I'm talking about linagliptin. Systolic blood. Why do we use linagliptin in combination with the SGLT2 inhibitor? There's a specific reason. I'm going to discuss this region in the next few slides. This drug decreases the systolic blood pressure, and the DPP-4 are the neutral drugs. Serum uric acid, cardiovascular outcomes, hospitalization for the heart failure, mortality, severe mortality, and then mortality, renal outcome, renal composite endpoints, albumin replication, and these all parameters, they are basically usefully benefited in case these drugs are combined. What happens if we start combining the drugs together? What happens? Try to see. If we use epagliflozin and the linagliptin, we find that there is a decrease in the HbA1c level by nearly 2%, which is a very significant decrease, because if the sulfonylureas, when they are used alone, they decrease the HbA1c level by 1% or 1.5%. But these two drugs, when they are used alone, and when they are used in combination, they are able to decrease the HbA1c level by 2% in drug-naive patients. There are those patients in whom there are no drugs being used and they are being diagnosed or they are being started on the treatment for the first time. What happens if the patients are already taking metformin? In those patients also, these drugs are able to decrease the HbA1c by 1.6%, which is a very, very significant number. These drugs are able to decrease the HbA1c levels in the initial 12 weeks. But what happens if these drugs are used for a very long period of time? The data was followed for about nearly 4.5 years, and it was found that their effect on the HbA1c reduction and is sustained for a very long period of time. And there are counter-regulatory mechanisms are not able to overcome this effect on the HbA1c reduction, whether used in drug-naive patients or those patients who are having a metformin use background. And not only that, these drugs, they have a significant decrease in the body weight and the blood systolic as well as the blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure reduction. This is the trial which showed that the epagliflozin, they will have a very significant effect in the blood pressure management, especially in the Indian population. Why it is in the Indian population? They are much more effective because Indians, they have the exaggerated mornings being researched compared with the Western population. And our Indian diets, they have a high salt intake, and we have high salt sensitivity than the Western population. And we tend to have a good number of patients who have non-dipper type of nocturnal hypertension. And these drugs, they basically cause natriuresis. So these drugs are likely to be very effective in blood pressure reduction. So this chart, you can see that the blood pressure reduction with the empagliflozin is much more in Asian population than in blacks and whites. And these are the blood pressure reduction effects of various other SGLT2 inhibitors. This is about the empagliflozin, which has a modest reduction of about 12.7 millimeters in a trial, and the dapagliflozin also, and the canagliflozin also. But the effect of the empagliflozin is the maximum among both. Why is it that we were trying to add the linagliptin and not the other DPP4 inhibitors with the empagliflozin? I just told you that the SGLT2, among the SGLT2 inhibitors, empagliflozin is likely to have a better BP reduction and a sustained blood pressure and sustained HbA1c reduction over the period of time. What about the DPP4 inhibitors? We find that the heart failure profile of the saxagliptin is not sound, and we are not certain about the kidney issues in the high risk kidney patient. And same about the dalagliptin, the high risk, the cardiovascular risk, and the heart failure and the kidney risk are not certain. Sitagliptin, a very old drug, but the renal profile is not certain. The linagliptin, on the other hand, has a safety profile, has a robust data to show that it has beneficial effect in the high severe risk patient, in the cardiac failure patients, and even in the high kidney risk patient. Whenever I have a patient of high kidney issues, and that is a low GFR, my mind immediately goes to the linagliptin, because this is one drug which I don't have to titrate the dose. I don't have to be bothered about decreasing the dose of linagliptin. So this becomes the first choice. And so when you feel that the patients with renal compromise, or the patients with cardiac issues, you do not hesitate to add empagliflozin with linagliptin. This is the trial which again shows, this is another graphic which shows that the empagliflozin will have the 3-point major adverse cardiac events, the cardiovascular deaths, and the dapagliflozin do not have these effects, and the saxagliptin along with the linagliptin. And so these two combinations, empagliflozin and linagliptin, they become the best choice in combining and having the best outcomes in these patients. Again, when we compare the empagliflozin with the linagliptin with the other DPP4 and the other oral hypoglycemic agents, we find that the empagliflozin is able to decrease the heart failure hospitalization by 44% in comparison to the other DPP4 inhibitors, and about 49% in comparison to the sitagliptin. And the linagliptin is able to decrease the cardiovascular outcomes by 23% and by about 26% in South Korea trials. So, clinical benefits of empagliflozin and the linagliptin combination, they have the robust HbA1c reduction. They are proven to have the cardiovascular and the heart failure evidence with the empagliflozin and linagliptin. And they have the proven renal evidence with this combination. And the weight loss is good, and there is a convenience of using the OD dose without having to monitor too much in these patients who are high-risk patients of cardiovascular disease and renal issues. Thank you very much. I hope we have been able to do justice, and now I open the discussion in the form of questions. I can see some questions. And the first question is, can I take the questions now? Fine. Looking into the current guidelines, should empagliflozin be used as the first add-on after the metformin in type 2 diabetes patients with ECVD? What is ECVD? I understand the cardiovascular disease. Yes, established cardiovascular disease. Yes, definitely these patients who have the established cardiovascular disease, especially the heart failure, there is no doubt that the empagliflozin should be the first line drug, and even the combination they can be used. And second question is, can empagliflozin and the linagliptin be given to the newly diabetic COVID patients if the patients are not controlled on the immunotherapy? No. The COVID patients, they have certain other issues, and the SGLT2 inhibitors, they should not be used in these patients because these drugs, they can cause dehydration, and they have good amount of osmotic diuresis and natriuresis. The patients with COVID, these drugs, they are not likely to be safe because these patients, they are likely to go into dehydration. So the DPP4 inhibitors alone are the drug of choice in patients with COVID because they have high fever and other issues. So when the DPP4 inhibitors alone are not able to control the blood sugar, the next addition should be the insulin. Even the metformin has not been found to be very safe in these patients, though, but the metformin, if given, they can be used under the guidance of a physician in the homebound settings. But in those patients who are admitted, even the metformin is not a good drug to control blood sugar in the COVID patients. And the next question is, should EMPA and LINA-FDC be used in renally impaired patients? Of course. This is the real scenario where these drugs, they can be safely used. Even up to the eGFR of 20, that is the end-stage renal disease, just before the end stage, the stage 3 of the renal disease, they can be very safely used. And but not one may not really bother about the potassium levels, though they should be checked, but may not be really bothering too much about the potassium levels and the titration of these drugs. The next question is, looking at the current guidelines, should empagliflozin be used as the first add-on after the metformin in treatment in type 2 diabetes patients with established cardiovascular disease? Yes, of course. Like I would rather go ahead that those patients who require a better HbA1c control, these drugs, they can be even preferred over the metformin, because at times metformin use is not indicated in patients who have the established cardiovascular disease and who have the reduced ejection fraction and the advanced cardiovascular disease. And these patients, these drugs like empagliflozin and DPP4 inhibitors, they score better in comparison to metformin in these patients. And the next question is from Dr. Ashwini Mehta. Can empagliflozin be given for the primary prevention of cardiovascular events in type 2 diabetes patients with ASCVD risk? Thank you, Dr. Mehta, for asking this important question. These drugs, they have shown to decrease the cardiovascular events and the risk of hospitalization for the heart failure. But as for the primary prevention is concerned, these drugs are yet to establish their role. For the primary prevention of the ASCVD risk, the diabetes control and the other measures are the primary measures, and these drugs should not be used for that. What is the opinion regarding the CVOT benefits, cardiovascular outcome benefits of remogliflozin? Remogliflozin is a very good drug, and it is a good drug for the masses because it is a very economical drug in comparison to the empagliflozin and dapagliflozin. But the cardiovascular outcomes of this drug are yet to be established. But those patients who are not having cardiovascular issues, these drug can be safely used. and those patients who have some affordability issues also, this can be a drug which can be used as a preference. But those patients who can afford, who have the cardiovascular issues and who have the renal compromise, then the empagliflozin with the linagliptin remains the first choice. I would say even over the metformin in these patients, because these drugs combinations, they do not need much monitoring for the dose adjustments and for the hyperkalemia even. So I think this is all about the combination, and I feel that this combination is a wonderful combination, and large number of patients over the period of time, period of years, have been controlled on these drugs, and all should use them, especially in the high-risk patients who have the heart failure, who have the chronic kidney disease, or who have the established cardiovascular disease over the other drugs. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you having joined us. I hand over the mic to the moderator and the.
Can we wait more, or should we conclude the session with your permission?
If there are no more questions, then we can finish off this session. I'm thankful to the all the viewers who have joined in and who have tried to elicit certain questions and try to clarify certain issues. I think their confidence in using the combination must have been better after going through all this data. And more trials are coming. Recently, a trial was there in the ACC, which again showed that the SGLT2 inhibitors are definitely a class apart, and we are going to rely upon these drugs much more in times to come. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you.
Sir, I think you have a network issue.
I don't have any network issue. There's a question, another question that
Okay,
what
sir.
is the opinion? What is the opinion? Before I finish, I take up this question. What is the opinion regarding the effects of the SGLT2 inhibitors on the lipid metabolism? Thus, this remains a contentious issue, and these drugs are known to increase the cholesterol. So, when you are using these drugs, it is always better to add on some statin and monitor the cholesterol levels. And thank you very much, all of you. And I now feel that there are no more questions, and now we can finish off this session. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, so I would like to thank you on behalf of the organizers for your educative talk. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lumen Pharmaceutical, and thank you all the all the doctors and all the other people who have joined and asked various important questions. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. I am ending this session now. Thank you.